Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first podcast here at the Sam Plucker podcast channel. Today, we're going to be discussing leadership in physical education and coaching. And today, I have Noah Johnson here with me today.
Yep, hello.
So, Noah is a classmate of mine at UW Oshkosh. We're both physical education, adapted physical education, health education, and coaching majors. And then we also coach. So Noah coaches youth basketball. He's coached a variety of different basketball teams, and he also runs a nonprofit basketball organization. And then on myself, I coach football over at University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. So he's kind of the basketball guy. I'm kind of the football guy, but we both are really interested in sports, athletics, and physical education. So thanks for coming on the show today, Noah.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so the point of this conversation today is leadership in physical education and coaching. So we're going to start off discussing what is good leadership. So Noah, when you think of good leadership, what are some things that you think about?
Well, basically, good leadership is just like organizing people. You're directing people and different personalities of people, encouraging them, pretty much picking out a common goal to achieve or, to strive for.
Right, I 100% agree with you, and I think leadership is becoming such a hot topic that everyone kind of wants to throw out their opinion on leadership. But I think you're really right. What leadership really comes down to is just the relationships. And I think we both know as coaches, and you can speak on basketball, but for me, football, if you peruse social media, you peruse any sort of website discussing football, 95% of the content is X's and O's. When in reality, like the really successful programs, understand that leadership is not about how much you know, so it's about how much you care. And then like you said, just managing and building those relationships. So how would you go about what grade level did you coach this year with your organization?
So this year I coached eighth grade. We had the same group from sixth grade. We went sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, built them all the way up. And we're a tournament team, so uh, we only get to practice maybe once, maybe twice a week, and then we're playing tournaments on the weekends that we don't practice.
Okay, so you definitely aren't with these kids on a daily basis. So I know you've been with them for a while now, but how do you establish yourself in a leadership role, and how do you get your team to understand that you're a leader that not only knows the X's and O's or the whatever you call them for basketball of the game, but that you actually care for them, and then how do you get them to play for you as a leader?
I mean, still being young yet, I like to jump in, encourage them as they're getting older. They're in eighth grade too, so I'll jump in on conditioning, like when we're working hard, try to just set up basic relationships with them to, figure out what the personality types are, who you can encourage and who you may have to get on a little bit more than others because that's the encouragement that, that they're good at. Uh, I think that's a really like basic understanding to build with that, figuring out who the kids are and how the best to get them to accomplish the goals that they feel comfortable getting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And on my end, I'm about a year older than the oldest player on the college team right now. So I'm coaching guys pretty similar to my age. So the same thing with you said, like just being physically involved and like showing them that you can still participate is, I believe, is huge. But also, I think a leader, no matter what arena they're in, kind of has and you can agree or disagree with me on this, but has a certain professionalism about them where they're going to hold themselves to a higher standard in their given arena on a consistent basis. Otherwise, they'll lose that leadership position or respect from their people underneath them pretty quickly.
Oh, I 100% agree. Like, as being a leader, I think you have to challenge yourself to always become a better leader. It would be ignorant to believe that we have accomplished, that we are the best that they can be. So you got to keep growing, asking questions, and owning up to the things that you can own up to show that, hey, I'm trying to get better. We're all trying to get better. We're, same goal.
Right. And I have a cool story. When I first started coaching at Oshkosh with Coach Pat Cerrone, he's been doing it forever. Really, really successful guy. And one of the things that he told me, and that stuck with me for a while, is that as a leader, you got to understand when to take a step back as far as the strategy and strategic performance of whatever you're in. If you're controlling every single aspect of it, one, the players or students won't be bought into it because they don't have as much of a say. But also, two, your mind is not as strong as your mind combined with all of the people underneath you. So if you as a leader are just constantly making up, these choices and not listening to anyone underneath you, you're not inherently going to get the best result the majority of the time. So when you're coaching at a youth level, you're teaching at a youth level, how do you incorporate their ideas, even though their understanding of the game might not be as great as yours, and their understanding just about life might not be as great as yours, just due to the fact that they are younger and they're not fully cognitively developed yet?
Hey, absolute power corrupts absolute, right? Everybody needs to
100%.
say it. So working with younger kids, I like to give choices of what they can do. I'm still, I guess, deciding what drill we're working on and how we're doing it, but I'm going to give them a choice from a couple of other, between a few, so they can, they feel like they have the choice of what they're doing while we're still working on the same thing. I also, like, after drills, I'll just kind of like pop in, like as we're shooting free throws or something. I'll just pop in with a couple of different people on the team and just ask questions about, hey, how do you think this drill went? What do you think could improve it? Like, so that they can like see that, this is for them. I mean, I'm organizing it, but I'm trying to make it for them to get better and us as a team to get better, not just do what I.
I really like that a lot, because I think moving more to the educational realm, I think there's a lot of teachers, especially at young grades, that say, hey, there's a curriculum. There's certain standards I have to do. My principal's on me. The superintendent's on me. We got to have this certain curriculum done. How can I give students autonomy within my club? Your proposal to apply that to a physical education realm would be to, hey, we're working on a striking unit today. Now, there's a various amounts of activities, lessons, units that you could do to work on the similar base object manipulation skills involved in striking. So you're allowing students to choose the activity, but you're still following the curriculum. And I think that's kind of something that a lot of people don't really buy into. And they do the same things over and over, thinking they have to follow this certain curriculum, when in reality, the curriculum is actually a lot more broader than they realize.
Yeah, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You've heard me use that one before. You pretty much, if you can't get the kids to buy in to what they're doing, then, I mean, no matter how good your lesson is, if they don't want to learn it, they're not going to learn it, or they're not going to be involved in it. And definitely with physical activity and FIAD, that a lot of that is just like effort based and wanting to get better yourself. There's like, obviously there's like motor skills that you have to learn, but it's a lot easier when they want to be there and they want to be learning. And that if you don't have a choice in what you do, it's a lot harder to buy in.
I really like that a lot. That kind of leads us into our next discussion point, the valuable attributes of leadership. And I think what you said was really powerful, because when you're a leader, I think that people assume that there's some sort of power hierarchy. You're making these decisions and you're in charge of something. When in reality, what you're really doing is you're building relationships and you're facilitating the results. You're not controlling the results, you're facilitating the results. So what you're doing is you're creating an environment that's compassionate, that allows the students or athletes to know you care about them, and then you're facilitating them. So like you said, you're leading a horse to water, but you can't drink. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get them to the point where they can develop competency or they can become successful. Now, you're not going to make them a great leader isn't making someone successful by physically doing things for them. They're just leading them to the opportunity and giving them the skills to be successful once they get to the opportunity. And the relationship part of that is huge. And the metaphor, you want your players to run through a wall for you is widely used, and I think it's a little outdated, but the premise of it is still important today. If a student or an athlete doesn't believe that you care about them, they are not going to give you full effort in anything, right? Because
I agree 100%.
On that.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about pretty much would be like Vygotsky's scaffolding. We're just trying to pretty much bring them there to the point where they don't know, and then they can, take that and go to the next level with that instead of just doing it for them. And I think the easiest way to do that is just building personal relationships, not trying to make every student be this, model, or every basketball player to be this model, rather be the best version of themselves.
Right. And I think the relationship piece in that, and building that relationship, is a lot off of what you just said. And I think with all these leadership presentations and leadership discussions and leadership, that is not how leadership's built, and that is not how relationships are built. Relationships take a long time. You're not going to come in and tell a kid on the first day who may have issues at home, may be living in poverty, may not know what his next meal is, may not have been able to trust an adult figure in their life, and you're not going to make that relationship immediately.
I think the perfect the perfect example of this is when you see a college coach get on a player. A lot of times you'll see it in like the NCAA, just because like you can physically see it at a better angle, but you'll see a coach just chewing out a player's, chewing them out for doing something wrong, and looking onto it for the first time and be like, how can he talk to him that way? But not understanding any of that relationship that they built. Like, that prior relationship allows that. I know that some players I can yell at a little bit more because they're a person that's how they like to be coached, or that's how they, are better coached. So when you don't know the full grasp relationship, it's harder to get that point.
Yeah, that's really the powerful part about leadership is that everyone who is a great leader has similar qualities, but their path to get there with every kid is different. And like, I think it was Tom Izzo, wasn't it, on Michigan State, who had that, they were getting on him at the NCAA tournament for yelling at one of his players, and his players are like, hey, I love the guy. He just wants me to be better. And,
you can look all through sports.
Go ahead.
And there's always been guys like that. You can look through sports all the time like that. I think J.J. Redick and Chris Paul talked about the relationship that they had, that they would be at each other's throats during practice and stuff, but that's just because they both want to get better. Now, that's not always the perfect environment for everything, but I mean, some people, you got to be flexible. You got to have a little bit of everything. If some people work better that way, you got to set up an environment where they can be like that.
Right.
And the guys that are needing encouragement get that.
Yep. And on that discussion on the stages of team building or team development, there's storming, forming, norming, and performing. The first stage of team development is storming. If you don't have some conflict, or someone's values or beliefs aren't being challenged, you're never going to get better. Because when you're developing a team as a leader, or developing a group of people as a leader, not everyone is going to fit the mold right away. Not everyone is going to fit the mold of what you're trying to create. And that's fine, but they have to follow certain values to fit in your system, whether that be respect, honesty, certain rules. And if there's no storming or there's no conflict, it means that nobody's challenging the norm, and it means that nobody's enforcing the values or beliefs of the group. So like you said, it's a product of people who really care about an outcome. So when I see like inner fighting and meaningful inner argument, I'm not talking about when you see a selfish argument, but when two guys are really arguing about the premise of what they're doing, like you said with J.J. Redick and Chris Paul, it's because they're both competitors and they both want to win. It's not because they want to get some up on the other person. And a great quote I heard was my high school football coach, Steve Jones, who's pretty heavily involved in leadership. He always said families fight, and that was a sign that our team was developing. when you think about your family and the people you're closest to, you argue with them. That's just life because you both care about stuff and you care about that person enough to try to change their opinion on stuff. Someone you don't care about, you're not going to argue with because they're just meaningless. So,
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know
Critical
how
thinking.
you view it, but
Oh, for sure. Critical thinking. If you don't understand something, or you may see a flaw in it, you got to ask the tough questions sometimes just to bring them to that level. When you're being leaders are not always people that are saying the comfortable things. Is what you're talking about, like having if they don't feel something right, a good leader is going to stand up and call that out. Sometimes it might be a little bit tough. I know we were talking about the J.J. Redick and Chris Paul story, but to another one, back when Dennis Rodman played on the Bulls, he coming off the bench the first time, they wanted him to start after injury. I think the injury on someone on the team, but he didn't want to come off the bench. They had to encourage him to come off the bench. And if you look at the leaders of that team, obviously Scottie Pippen or Michael Jordan, but Dennis Rodman was a leader on that team just as well. Even though he was coming off the bench, he knew his role and he didn't want to start. He didn't think he was good enough to start, but the team helped encourage him. That just goes to show that there are so many different types of leader roles that you don't want to just form everybody into the same type of person or the same type. Hey, this is the model. You have to fit into this model. There's always the quiet leaders that just show up every day on time, do their job, get it done. And then there's those vocal guys that are saying the right things, that are encouraging. So I think it's just important to realize all the different types of leaders, and by by putting them together and forming together those relationships is when good leadership can be truly valuable to a youth to achieving the goals that they want to.
100%. I'm on board with you. And in reality, an immature coach or teacher will assume that the highest level performer physically is the best leader, when, as we all know, that's not necessarily true. And actually, a lot of the best players to ever play were not necessarily great leaders. Some of the guys like Derek Fisher were some of the best leaders ever, just bulldog type guys, team first guys that not necessarily were on or not necessarily in the highlights every night, but they kept stuff together. Like when you look at the Shaq and Kobe beef, and you look at some of the veterans on that team that really kept that team together. Yeah, Kobe and Shaq. The argument is who won the ring for each other. I say there's a lot of veterans on that team that played a pretty dang big role, because those two were at each other and they ended up winning a championship. So just having that leader, the true leader, who is not in it for themselves. They don't care about the money. They don't care about the All-State award. They don't care about the scholarship. They don't care about nothing other than that team winning.
100%. The team when somebody that puts the team before themselves.
Right, and that's tough to find. It really is, and we're a results-based business in physical education and athletics. Education is all results-based, standards-based grading. Are you to the standard or are you not? Right? Looking at it just purely from an outsider's view. Did you win or not athletics? When in reality, the steps to get there aren't as black and white as people think they are. And if you focus so much on the results, you're going to miss a lot, because the people who truly get you the best results sometimes are not the best individual performers. You could have a student in your physical education class that in the psychomotor and cognitive domains are not able to demonstrate competency in a lot of the standards, but in the affective domain, they're a leader. They practice safety. They show compassion. They motivate others to do better, and they actually make your class better. Whereas the high-performing student might not do any of those things. So just to throw someone off because they're not necessarily physically performing the best is actually a huge disadvantage to your classroom and your team. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Can you repeat the end of that question again?
Yeah, so just have you ever had an experience where either you realized that before or later that, a player you had or a student you were working with or an individual working with who was not a good performer was actually a very integral part of the success of that
Oh,
group.
yeah. So in layman terms, like high team guys. That's what we call them in our basketball. Guys like Draymond Greens, like the guy that does all the dirty work, puts the team in front of him. Pretty much any offensive lineman in football. A lot of times
Right.
we'll refer to that guys that aren't going to get the glory, or maybe not even the best player on your team. Uh, I see a lot of times as a coach, I look for those guys and I try to, you know, push them to be the leaders. I think it gives vocal leaders of the team. I think it gives good example that anyone can be a leader on the team, and I think it also drives your top end students or your top end players on your team. I think it gives them something to like try to fight for. Try to be a good leader too, because there's someone else on the to hold them accountable as well. Uh, I think that's actually the most important thing to get a team over the hump. Somebody that can go in and be the vocal leader and hold the really, really good players accountable and the players that are not as good accountable. When someone's on the top, like when a top learner or a high level student, some of that stuff comes so natural to them that they might not even have to try as hard as someone that's not as good. And then when you see someone not working as hard, it doesn't encourage you to want to work hard. See someone that, it doesn't have it given to them, that they have to really fight and struggle to get there, but they're the ones that are encouraging everyone. It takes those high level learners or the people that come easier to, and it forces them to give it to, not to go halfway or cheat themselves a little bit.
Right. I like that a lot. And then transitioning here, who is the best leader, or what is the best leadership experience, whether that be a full season or a couple seasons or an individual game or practice? And then what made that experience something that carries with you?
Yeah, I think looking back, just one of my old baseball coaches, he was my Legion baseball coach, who also I ref football with. He coaches girls softball, basketball, just like one of those longtime coach. He was just always the person to like push you to be the best you can be, regardless of like how good you were, which was always important to me. He took each, like, the relationship that he built were each individual relationships that like it felt important for myself to, like, that I was holding myself accountable and just to better myself as a player. I turned to a lot of the things that he taught me now as a coach, and I kind of use those things to like help me coach, almost like a outline.
Yeah, that's really good. And I had a really good experience growing up through elementary, middle school, and awesome high school experience with coaching. And when I went out and ended up playing college football at Division I school, I really realized that leadership, um, just because you're in a leadership position doesn't mean you're a good leader. I've always had great leaders, just people who are really good, people who I wanted to play for, the head coaches who are just really good people to be around. And when I got there, I'm like, okay, here it is, the pivotal experience of my life. This is the top level of college football. There's NFL scouts here. There's guys who play in the NFL. We got All-American guys. This is awesome. But then you realize that some of the coaches there, some of the administration there at the highest level are really bad leaders. And just because you're in a leadership position at a certain place doesn't mean that you're a good leader. And to me, it was baffling at the time because you're so used to looking up to coaches and all these great experiences that you really got to take a step back and realize that, okay, now for us, I'm a teacher now. Just because I'm a teacher doesn't mean I'm a good leader. Just because I believe in these things doesn't mean I'm a good leader. You got to put boots on the ground. You got to do this 24/7 every single day of your life. You can't. Leadership is one of those things, and it's a lifestyle. So if I'm telling my kids that we're going to get up and work out at 6 a.m. for morning workouts, and they got to be there 15 minutes early, the second I show up late, it's over. I've already showed them that it's okay. Like, you got to set the standard every single day of your life if you want to expect that out of the people underneath you.
Oh, yeah, I think when you talk about coaching, I think for a good coach, you have leadership, you have teaching, you have like the schematics or the X's and O's, and then just like the personnel that they put themselves around. So I've had like coaches in my life that were awesome leaders, and I felt like they really lacked like either the ability to teach or the ability to like scheme, or just like didn't have a good team around them. So it gets, when you look at it into a whole, some of those things are intertwined to make a good coach. But like, you're exactly right. When you're a coach, you have to bring that every day. Like, you have to live what you teach. If you don't, like, if you're talking about showing up on time, if you don't show up on time, then your word doesn't mean anything to them. And if you're a man that you lay the law down, then no one's gonna listen to it because you can't even listen to your own word.
Right. I think that's the life and death of a lot of leaders. If you look at a lot of unsuccessful programs, it's and it might not necessarily be the showing up late aspect, but telling kids what to do when you don't do the same things yourself. So respect people, but then you're F-bombing the ref.
Yeah.
Treat others with respect, yet you're making fun of the kids at practice. And like you said, kids are smart. Like, kids know what's going on. Like, you're not going to fool them. Either they know you are what you are, or you're not. And I think another important aspect, excuse me, about this leadership stuff is that when you're a leader and when you're in charge of a group of people, you got to understand that the same conversations you had with your subordinates when you were underneath a leader, they're having. So when you're 100%. A player, right? So just remember, when you're a student or you're a player, now when you flip it over to a coach or a teacher, those kids are having the same conversations you were having. So what are they saying? Is it good or is it bad? And you got to know whether or not they respect you, whether or not you got to change.
Yeah. I think it was you can't do this all the time, but a good tool that I used during during a venture outdoor class was allowing the students to make the contract, or allowing your team to. So you almost have like a team rule. It's rules that you set up as a team. Like, you bring them all together and you ask, hey, what makes a solid team? Do you show up late? Do you think that's important to show up on time? And then you have the team make the rules. And then everyone gets held accountable to the rules that you have made as a team. And we did that for one of the outdoor venture classes that I took. And I thought that was just a really good way. Plus, it helps bring like the unity of it, as in like, hey, this is more than just one person. If pretty much it allows everyone to be a part of it, rather than just one person making the rules and everybody follows those rules.
I like
democracy rather than a dictator.
I like that a lot too in education. It's easier to hold students to standards they created. So if you're in a first grade physical education class and you make that contract and they said one of the things is to not talk when the teacher's talking, and now John's talking when you're talking, you can tell John, hey, remember, what's the contract? We don't want to do that, right? And John will know, and John will accept that rule because he helped create it, right? Like, it's not this arbitrary rule that came down from the heavens. It's something that John created. Yeah, and it's meaningful because
from the dictator of John's first grade class. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So what's the most important lesson you learned as a leader? And it could be a couple if you have any, but just give me an example of you in a leadership role, which I know you've had a lot of, and something that sticks with you, whether it be a student interaction, another leader interaction, anything that you can think of that would be a good story to get out there for people who are trying to learn how to be a positive leader.
I think just back, coming out, it was actually, I was working in a factory. So not as a coach, not as a student or in any of those roles. And I just like questioned one of the practices that we were doing every day. Didn't make any sense to me, and it made some people uncomfortable in the management. Like, why is this guy that's, I was like 19 years old, right out of high school, but it was just something like that wasn't effective. It wasn't making sense to me, and I asked it and I pushed it around a little bit, and then I got pushed back, and they told me that, actually, I think Noah, you make a good point. We're gonna change it, and I think just showing that good leaders aren't always on the top, and a good leader you should make things, sometimes it should be uncomfortable. If you don't think something's right, you should question why it's not right. Just because you want to change something doesn't mean you don't care greatly about it. It's most of the times it's the exact opposite. You want to change it because you want something to be the best you can. So as a leader now in my spot, when I have kids questioning what I'm doing, I think to myself, rather than, hey, don't question me, I know more than you, I think of it as, hey, this kid really cares about what he's doing and trying to get better. How can I, answer his question, or how can I adjust what I'm doing to make more sense to everyone, to be better?
Right. That's a really powerful story. And my story, the lesson I learned was kind of a twofold story. It was a lesson I learned really young, but I didn't really understand the meaning of it until I got older. So when I was younger, elementary, middle school type age, I wasn't someone who necessarily conformed to the standards in which my peers thought it was appropriate to behave. Whether at the time it was the cool thing to do back then was like to sneak, whether it was sneaking into an elementary school to play basketball, or just some immature things that kids would do, hanging out at the park, playing airsoft wars on school grounds, just stuff that I knew was wrong. And I never conformed to it. And a lot of times I just spent time with family because I didn't want to do a lot of the stuff the kids my age were doing at that time. And, it was tough at the time because, everyone's out having fun and you're not hanging out with them. But I just knew morally and somewhere deep down that I had to help hold myself to a higher standard. Now, from what I understand about leadership, is that leaders think differently. When I study leaders have thought differently throughout the entirety of their life, and they think big picture. Leaders can't settle for the instant gratification. So yeah, if we go have an airsoft war in the schoolyard, Susan, the sixth grader, might think that I'm cute and might like me, so the instant gratification. But the big picture of it is that I could get in trouble, and this could lead me down a bad path, or this could disappoint my family, or this could affect my schoolwork, or this could suspend me from a basketball game. And I think leaders can't settle for that instant gratification. And I think, honestly, I do think it's something you're born with, and the instant gratification, and then also the uncomfortability. And I think that's something that's pretty prevalent within a lot of different forms, within a lot of different mediums. Me and you being in class together are people who volunteer to talk a lot in front of the class. And that's because we care about the topic, but also we're not scared to be wrong. We're not scared to make a mistake, and we're not scared to say something that someone else might not agree with, or someone might get upset about. And that is what a good leader does. And I'm not saying we're perfect leaders, but that is, I think, something that both of us have had, and we're both comfortable with sharing our opinion. And like you said in your example, if you don't say something, nothing's going to change, right? And a leader, 100%. If you're taking over a program or a class that's having issues, if you aren't willing to say something that might make someone else uncomfortable, it's not going to change, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. You got to push past that. Like, I mean, anything worthwhile is usually difficult. Like, if it's easy, at the end of the day, it's not going to be very valuable or an achievement to have done. That's same with like setting up something. If you're taking over something that wasn't done very well, and you're just coming in as like a middle of the road person, like, I'm going to try to do it in a respectful way, but I'm going to question the things that I have every day, the questions that I have, like, why can't it be done this way? I'm going to ask those questions just because I care about what we're doing. Like, if I didn't care about it, then I wouldn't ask those questions. And when people have different opinions than me, I don't look at it like I don't get to take offense to it. I might ask questions to like better understand it or to try to bring them to think critically about things that I've already thought about. But when in doubt, just hearing another opinion or different opinions and different perspectives just helps you grow to understanding people better and how people think and like what makes them go. And it makes just you think about how you believe and what you believe in makes you think about it different. Like I would never, if someone says something, if I believe in something and they say it to me and I don't agree with it, it doesn't mean I just like disregard it. I'm gonna I'm gonna actually like, hey, I'm gonna try to make that and change my opinion or shape my opinion for it to be different, to be better with this new factual evidence that I found. Or
All right, I'm gonna give you an interesting scenario here, and I'm gonna give you. I was proposed this scenario by a teacher on Twitter, and who is a thought-provoking person and does a really good job at just teaching me some of the basics and just put me in some situations that could happen. So I'm going to tell you the situation, tell you my answer, and then I want you to give your opinion on what you would have done differently or what you liked about what I had for my answer. Okay.
all right,
Okay. So you're hired as a physical education teacher. It is your first year, and you are at the high school level. So you're juiced up, right? I mean, this is everything you worked for. You finally graduated, you got the degree, you got the job, got a new apartment. You finally traded in your college car for a new car. You're ready to roll. You got your brand new Nikes on. You just got through, and the kids are coming, and you're just juiced up. Like you've been preparing for this moment your whole life. You're going to change lives. And you're in a staff of 5 total physical education teachers. There's 4 other physical education teachers at the high school. And you come day one to the first meeting, and you have these huge unit plans, 150 pages. You've wrote out everything. You have these great portfolios for the kids, and all the other teachers come with nothing. And they look at you and they say, "Hey, look, I appreciate the effort, but that's going to make us look bad. You can't do that. What would you do?" And I gave the answer. I said, "I'm not into teaching to become friends with the fellow teachers, right?" And that might sound initially bad, but what I mean by that is I'm into teaching to help the kids. I want to work with the group of other teachers to create the best experience possible for the kids. If those teachers aren't willing to work towards the best experience possible, I'm not going to let that hinder the experience I provide to my kids. What do you think about that?
I mean, I do agree. I said earlier to bring it to coaching, just like the personnel around you, that it's very much a factor, and it is teaching too. Personally, though, I just a little bit different. What I would have done is I would try to teach the fellow teachers, like not step on toes, but like if they don't want to do that, maybe you know share your lesson plans with them. Like what maybe you can use some of these instead of looking bad. You don't have to, here's some extra resources. Try to build up that team around you and take that leadership role and now apply that to the team because you're 100% right that it's not about the teachers, it's about the students. And we need to make the best outcome for the students. But without adjusting your team of teachers or helping your team of teachers to be better, it's going to be hard to get all those kids the correct education that they should be receiving. So I think it's important to take a role amongst your administration and your physical education team and help just like get them past throwing the ball out. And this is just your old school gym class. Like you should be a new life of encouragement and like spark to help encourage those teachers to be the best they can be as well.
I like that a lot, and I knew you were going to kind of give me that type of answer. And the great part about it is that there's so many different forms of leaders, and I think that's what that question really shows. So Noah, I know you take more of a holistic approach, and I take more of a clean my backyard. And once I got my backyard in order, then I'm going to start cleaning other backyards. So we take a little bit different approach to look. But the point I'm trying to make is with leadership, especially in education, if your goal is to make the best experience for the kids, you can't be wrong. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
if your goal is and you're trying your best to make the best experience for the kids, and all you care about is the best experience for the kids, it's really hard to go wrong
That's
as a teacher.
Yep, that's the ethical standpoint. Like we've talked about good leaders and bad leaders. Some of the best leaders are notorious leaders, and in this case, this would be, like to be a good leader. If you keep that in mind, then like if your goal is to purely for the students to be the best, to achieve their goals and to be the best they can be, then the ethics is right. That then you have to work on your approach of teaching and making them work together. But the ethics part's huge. Like that, you can have good leaders that teach wrong things, and you can have bad leaders that teach good things.
Right. You're 100% right, and I think when you really dive into leadership, you're gonna end up studying a variety of different people, and this is something that I learned early on in leadership is that you have to study a guy like Hitler to understand leadership, right? Because what what Hitler did, a lot of people think is what leadership is. It's rallying a lot of people around one idea. Now I know me and you would feel like that's not good leadership because it's not a good value that he's rallying people around. But that's where the idea of leadership starts for a lot of people is that how many people can you rally around? And by studying, people who are not necessarily good people, there are a lot of leadership principles that you can. And what I mean by that is that when you're studying leadership, um, you're not going to learn a lot from a Hitler. That's not what I'm saying. But you're going to learn a lot from someone who's a bad basketball coach. You might even learn more about leadership from someone who is a bad basketball coach than a good basketball coach. Because when you examine what someone is doing wrong, you can actually make an active plan to change that situation. Um, the hard part about studying great leaders is a lot of them are just naturally great people, and some of the stuff and some of the abilities they have and some of the resources they have are unattainable. For example, trying to run a Vince Lombardi like program at a high school is probably not possible, but taking a look at a high school program that is struggling, and getting a full overview of that, and then examining what you can do to make changes to bring your leadership style in and to get results might be more applicable. And you might feel differently about that, but that's something I've kind of learned in the process is that sometimes it's important to study the failures. And when I mean bad leadership, I don't mean bad behavior like Hitler. I mean bad performance.
Yeah, I think when you talk about leadership, there's just so many dynamics. You have like ethos or ethics. Like you have to, for a really a great leader will have good ethics, have the traits of a leader and just be able to uh, think of it as like in like what you were talking about before, as like a big picture or of like the team or the group orientated rather than specific anything that's specific to what betters you. So like when you talk about bad, like what I said before, you have leaders that I've had really good leaders that run a tight, as a team, we were a really good team. We were just not, he didn't understand that X's and O's to really put it together for us to be good, as well as if I had guys that know the X's and O's really good, but aren't very strong teachers and don't have very strong, good ethics and like uh, fairness or like kind of just lets the best player play and do his own thing because he's the best player and doesn't hold him accountable. So yeah, so when you're talking about leadership, there's so many dynamics that go in, and I can look to like some of the poor examples that I have had as one of the followers that I was following, and I try to learn from that and make sure I don't follow the same mistakes. Learn the X's and O's, but try to go to the leaders that maybe weren't the best X and O's in my life to like combine them so you have both of them.
Right. I like that you said that, and I think that's very valuable, and I think it's something people overlook. they look at someone who is a famous figure or leader in the world, and they say, well, that person did bad things or that person was unsuccessful, and they don't research them and study them. But leadership is, like you said, is such a dynamic activity that you can study anybody who has a leadership role and learn from it. And I'm really glad, that you're into analyzing poor leadership, because a lot of people think that you can only study good leaders. But like you said, you've learned a lot, and you probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably adhere your behavior more to trying to not act like someone who is a bad leader rather than trying to act like someone who's a good leader. Is that fair to say? You consciously think of what not to
Oh
do?
yeah. Oh yeah. More so just because like personality. Some of the best leaders that I've been around have a different temperament than me, and that's just normal. I mean, me and you have different temperament. Everybody has different temperament from each other. Uh, that's not the big, so I don't always necessarily model exactly how I want to be around someone else because I mean, let's be honest, no one's a perfect leader anyways. Everybody has better flaws. You got to learn from everyone around you, even if they're not as you know experienced. They still have experiences that are unique to them that aren't to you, and you can learn from that, whether they're good or bad. You just have to identify them and identify what makes them good and what makes them bad, and how to improve off that and better yourself and better yourself so you can better the common goal for the group of people you're trying to lead.
Right. And moving on a little bit, so we talked a lot about coaching. We're going to transition to more implementation within physical education here. So if you first of all, do you believe that PE teachers should teach leadership? Yes or no?
Absolutely. I think it's a really natural place for it to be taught. Obviously, education, a lot of physical activity, physically people moving. That means you're feeling uncomfortable sometimes. You have to be in certain positions that some people might not be as good at, some people might be good at, where to be. It's actually managing of people. And I think it's a perfect opportunity for people to step up and help out. It's a perfect scenario for leaders to be naturally born and to show.
And how? And this is a tough question because I agree with you 100% on everything. But so you're starting your first teaching job, your day one, right? Or when in the summer when you're lesson planning. How are you going to teach leadership within physical education?
Well, we've learned in that adventure outdoor class, we learned about like the outdoor adventure, which is the 7 steps of adventure. That's a great way to build leadership just because we have people talking and connecting. But just in your basic education class, if you're doing any activities, adapting the roles to the activities so people can like get better experience of talking or organizing people, working on a sport ed unit, the sports education model unit plan, having different roles and allowing people to just fulfill those roles and lead a group of people in like a micro or in a smaller scale definitely helps students and figure out like how to facilitate people. I mean, there's
Right.
definitely many different ways that you can do it. Personally, I think that's a great way. It was a way for me to help become a better leader just by playing games and like even if I've never played the game before, doing activities, just encouraging the people and try to facilitating and have like a good atmosphere because I was always a big atmosphere person. It's hard to do anything in a poor atmosphere, so I was big on making the atmosphere like able to get work done and encouraging.
Yeah, I think that's really good. It's similar to what I do. So a saying I've heard a lot is you don't learn leadership, you do leadership. So you can put students in front of a PowerPoint and show them video after video and give them a lecture and have the best PowerPoint. And at the end of the day, that's not teaching them anything. You can teach them some base knowledge, but if they're not actively applying it, it doesn't mean anything. Leadership is something you have to do. So atmosphere, it's funny. My whole thing with leadership is creating a stressful atmosphere. Um, you can do a leadership activity where a student is leading a group of people and they're going to complete it if it's easy, no matter what, and it's not going to stress them. For me, leadership starts and ends in stressful environments. Being a leader when your coach is up 30 doesn't really mean anything. Oh, yeah, you're putting in your backups. You're such a great leader. You're getting everyone involved. That's easy. But how about when you're up 10 with 5 minutes left and it's senior night, you got to determine whether or not you're going to put the senior who's worked his tail off in the game, but you could potentially lose. Now, that's a leadership decision, right? So
Yeah.
For me, creating that atmosphere in physical education is all about stressful environments. And I think you can stress people two ways, students. It's physically and mentally. So mentally would be challenging group tasks. A lot of stuff that we do in outdoor adventure. Just those tasks where you got to use your critical thinking skills, and you got to lead a group in a stressful environment where you don't know the answer. You have to find the answer. And also physically. So a good example of this is in a workout, and you're doing the warm up. It's pretty easy to lead the warm up. But now after running a mile, doing burpees, sit-ups, doing a marine challenge type workout, like I designed in my fitness units, now you're in the last home stretch. You're doing push-ups, and you're breathing so heavy it hurts to talk. Are you willing to look the person next to him and motivate him, or are you going to save your breath and do your own push-ups? Right? That's leadership. Are you willing to sacrifice your comfortability for the team? And a cool leadership experience that I was a part of is when we would do our hill running in high school football, there's always one or two people that would be behind. So if we'd run 5 in a row, there'd always be people 2 hills behind. You'd see a couple guys run down the hill and run the other 2 with them. They just ran 5. They're running 2 more. It sucks, but they're sacrificing the me for the we, excuse me. They're sacrificing their comfortability for the good of the team to help a teammate. And putting students in situations to see who will rise to that occasion is to me how you develop a leader. And it to me it's a lot like putting all the students in an environment that has the potential for a great leadership opportunity. Now, what are you going to do about it? That's to me what teaches leadership. And as we know, the cream rises to the top, and the selfish people rise to the bottom, right? Because they're just going to get their rep done, and they're not going to care about anyone else. And the cream's going to rise to the top, and they're going to push through and put the team, the we over me, and then you're going to figure out who your leaders are, and then you're going to help use them to help build other leaders. But it's an interesting environment to come up with, and I'm sure you've had a lot of experiences like that. But when the going gets tough, the tough stay tough, man. And
100%.
Those situations don't build character; they show character.
Oh, absolutely. And it's important to make those stressful situations, like to control them. That's why they like to use adventure so much, because like those strategy games or the low ropes and high ropes has a lot of the perception of danger, or that it might not be as safe. It actually is, but it brings up those stressful situations to have people like try to communicate with one another.
Awesome. So wrapping up here, a couple more questions. So I'm going to let you give yourself a little spiel here and pretending you're at an interview here and you're going for your first PE job, coaching job, and you get poised with a question: what makes you a good leader? How would you respond to that?
Oh, I'd say I'm a good leader just because I lead by example, and in a democracy type setting. So I allow the big picture to drive what I do, and I just try to facilitate personalities amongst the group to achieve the big picture. So as a coach, we, as a group, pick out our goals, what we want to achieve, how we might achieve them, and then I hold everyone, including myself and my staff, a part of that. And as a physical educator, we're going to look at our staff, pick out our learning objectives and what we're trying to achieve as a group, and then hold everyone accountable for that and put the team in front.
That's awesome. And what would you improve on, or what can you improve on as a leader?
And educators are constant learners. You should be always learning and always trying to learn more. I mean, we are educators, so that's kind of obvious, but you can learn from everyone and every experience. So I want to broaden my horizons and just expand out, diversify myself, working with as many different types of people as I can, just to better myself and learn from different types of leaders that I've encountered throughout my life, and just take good things and things that they could improve on and that I could improve on and build from that into the future. How about yourself?
I think something that I've been blessed with is just a natural ability to commit myself to a group or a belief or a mission, and just work effortlessly to attain that goal. And I think that has allowed me to have some sort of motivation or some sort of authority over people, where they understand that I'm so committed to this goal that whatever I am asking them to do, or whatever I am having them do with me, is something that is valuable toward the success of their outcome. And something that I would improve on is, I think that sometimes my passion is so powerful that I want to take such a huge role that I don't necessarily develop leaders under me. And that's something that I've really been working on in education. I feel like as an educator, I do a really good job at developing leaders, but I feel like as a coach, I haven't been able to develop an ability yet to develop leaders underneath me, and give away power. Being a young coach, I've always, dreamed of being the shot caller, the guy who calls the big play to win the game. And I'm starting to realize that that's not what coaching is about. Coaching is actually a lot more like teaching, where I'm just trying to facilitate their learning, and giving them the opportunity to produce the results.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, man. Those are good points.
All right. So lastly, we're going to close here with any advice. So anyone listening to this podcast, thank you if you've made it through. This is our first podcast. We're young, but both of us actually have a lot of experience working in leadership, and we've been exposed to a ton of different leaders throughout our lives. So what advice would you give to someone who's listening to this podcast, who wants to be a better leader, but doesn't really know how to do that?
Sid, just let your voice be heard. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid to talk or bring up points that you think of. I know a lot of times there's different leaders can have different personalities, and some people are a little bit more quiet. But I just encourage everyone to speak out and get their ideas across. No ideas are bad. Only bad idea is one that isn't heard. So just let your voice be heard, and be open-minded about opinions. Not everybody has the same opinion as you, but everybody's opinion can be of value.
That's awesome. And for me, I think our generation has become such a generation of conformity that I just really challenge people to look outside of their realm and understand that when you're a leader, you're going to lose some friends. You're going to lose some relationships, because if you're a true leader, you're going out on a limb and you're committing yourself to something that's greater than you. And a lot of people don't understand how or why you do that. So you might lose a relationship over that. You're really committed to your teaching. You might lose some of your close friendships because they don't understand why you're so committed to providing a quality experience for your students or your athletes. And I'm not saying that you should fully commit your life to one thing and not spend time with your family, but I'm saying that if you're truly involved in something and you're in a leadership role, you should do everything you can in your power to create a positive experience for that person. And you should do everything in your power to be a leader that makes that person enjoy being underneath you and having a great life. Because when you're in charge of someone, it's a lot more than the 8 to 5. You're in control of that person in that realm, and you have a huge impact on their life. Some teachers and coaches don't realize just because you only have that student for 1 hour doesn't mean that they're not thinking about you for the rest of the day. Because if you make them feel bad, the rest of their day is going to be affected. You have a huge role as a teacher and coach. And what you got to do is to really take that seriously and to be passionate about it and to make a mission statement and say, here's what I'm going to do every single day of my life for these people. And if you're not passionate about it, honestly, find something else to do, because life is too short. And if and the people underneath you are not going to have a great experience. Find something you're passionate about, dig your heels into it, dive in the pool, whatever analogy you want to do, and work every second you can to help those people underneath you have a great experience. And I don't think you can fail.
Yeah, that empathy that like goes with it. You're almost putting them above you. You care about what they're doing, not about, you want to be the best teacher you can be, not because of you, but because the students that you have, because you want to give those students the best education.
Right. And I'm really, really glad you came on here today, Noah. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
And I hope that everyone listening, took a piece or two away from it. But this was just the first podcast. I'll have some more guest people on, and I'm sure Noah will come back on. I hope you appreciated. I hope you appreciated the effort, and then just hopefully you learned something, and hopefully you took something away. And most of all, if you are in a leadership role, I am really glad that you're here listening to this, because all it's going to do is help the people underneath you have a great experience. And that's really all that leadership is about. Like Noah said, it's the we over me. What are you doing on a daily basis to help those people have a better life? And in return, that's what leadership is. And that's really what life is. And that is probably the most valuable trait a person can have. And that's probably the most happiness a person can have, more than money, more than anything, is helping someone else have a better life, and the happiness and the purpose of life that you feel from completing such tasks. So thank you all, and stay tuned for podcast 2. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thanks again, Noah.